Senator Evan Bayh is one of the conservative Democrats in the Senate, and he's one of the guys that quietly, behind the scenes, was backing up Ben Nelson, Joe Lieberman, Mary Landrieu, et cetera, saying, hey, look, I've got issues with the public option or the Medicare buy-in. I'm not sure we want to go in that direction. Now, he was savvy enough to not make too much public noise about it, so he wouldn't catch as much heat from progressives, liberals, his base, and frankly, his voters, right? And partly because he knows that he is more exposed to charges of hypocrisy here and self-serving interest. So he was smart in not saying much in public. But we do know that he was in the camp against the public option, et cetera. He is one of the more conservative Democrats in the Senate. Now, why might that be? If you ask Senator Bayh, of course, he says, well, look, I have principled reasons against it, and I'm just a conservative / moderate, and I believe there should be less government interference. When you look at the numbers, you might get a different sense of it. It turns out, funny enough, his wife, Susan Bayh, is on the board of WellPoint, the largest for-profit health insurance company in the country. Who could have guessed? Now, they wouldn't have any financial incentive there, would they? Oh, look at this. Susan Bayh, according to the Indianapolis newspapers, the Indy Star, has received over $2 million for her service on different healthcare boards between 2006 and 2008. Just on healthcare boards, $2 million. Well, how about WellPoint? Well, she owns, according to the employee stock things that they had to, as senators, et cetera, they have these obligations to disclose. She owns anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million in stock of WellPoint. In fact, since Joe Lieberman, backed by Evan Bayh, said there would be no public option, the stock of WellPoint alone has gone up enough to give Susan Bayh, the wife of Senator Bayh, a profit since that time of between $125,000 to $250,000 in her stock options. Now, the fact that they're bringing in several $100,000 extra money by opposing the public option, now that wouldn't influence them, would it? The fact that she's received $2 million overall from these boards and nearly $1 million over 2 years from just WellPoint, now that wouldn't influence Susan Bayh, which would influence Evan Bayh, right? No, of course not. Now, if you ask them that, they get outraged, and they pretend it's personal, and they say, oh, you're coming after my wife. What do you mean I'm coming after your wife? That's what Joe Lieberman said when we were questioning how much money Hadassah Lieberman makes from the health insurance companies as a lobbyist, consultant, et cetera, et cetera. No, you've got a great scam set up, right, where you funnel money into your family based on no particular expertise. Susan Bayh doesn't know. When she would never worked in the health insurance industry, never worked in healthcare at all, and guess when all of a sudden she appeared on all of these healthcare companies' boards? Funny enough, right when her husband got elected senator. Well, you look at that coinky-dink. I'm sure that just a totally large coincidence. They hired her for her independent expertise. It's a trick that they do over and over. They do it with Democrats. They do it with Republicans. We did a very similar story about Orrin Hatch and his son and how much money he makes off of lobbying. And then Orrin Hatch says, oh, lobbyists. No, I got nothing to do with it. It's the family trick. This is the same thing that Norm Coleman had trouble with in Minnesota because his wife was getting paid for something she had no idea about. She never showed up to work, and they were funneling money over to Norm Coleman. In fact, an insider in that case said, yeah, that's why we hired her, to get Norm Coleman money, because senators don't make enough money, and we figured he'd help us out. That's how the system is built. They're funneling all the money to their family, to their sons, or in some cases daughters. We've covered that with some Republican lawmakers before, and especially with their wives. So they have personal money on the line here to make sure that we don't get real health care reform. Now, has Obama challenged this system? What is he going to do, call out Senator Biden? No way, right? I don't even know if I'd say I would expect him to go that far. No, I'd be shocked if he went that far, right? But so he didn't challenge that. But I have a much bigger problem with the media, because it's supposed to be their job to point this out. Now, the Indy Star should get all the credit in the world for finding this, right, and talking about it and publicizing it. But where's the rest of the media? When Evan Bayh goes to do interviews, why doesn't anybody ask him on national television, hey, wait a minute, your wife made $2 million over the last 2 years from these insurance companies. Isn't that an obvious incentive for you to back the insurance companies and not back real reform? I don't care how outraged you pretend to be over that question. And the reason the media doesn't ask him is because they all live in Washington. It's that proverbial cocktail circuit where they're all buddies, and they need access to the senators, they need access to the politicians to get them on their show, and everybody goes along and gets along, and everybody's just fine except us. We're getting hosed. They're getting rich, and we're not getting the real reform because they have a financial incentive not to give it to us. So whether it's Michelle Bachmann with her hypocrisy on farm subsidies and Chuck Grassley and Sam Brownback and all those Republicans, or whether it's the Democrats with their hypocrisy on getting paid by the insurance companies and then pretending to reform them but actually making them richer. These guys aren't working for us. In the last segment, I said it was the corporatists versus the progressives. Maybe more accurately, it's the corporatists versus the populists. And we can have allies on the right-wing side because they're not happy to get their money robbed either by these politicians. Unfortunately, they've been redirected to help the corporatists by the corporatists. But if we can find a way to reach them, we actually are the majority. I mean, who other than these politicians and the media, and they are the ones in power, and that's why, of course, they have the stranglehold, right? But other than them, which real American thinks, oh, no, I want to pay higher insurance premiums because it's very important that Susan Bai make more money? Why would we think that? Nobody thinks that, right? So we've got to find a way to break through the media. We've got to find a way to break through the politics and the politicians, and whether they're Republicans or Democrats, and get to the heart of this problem. And the problem is that the lobbyists own Washington. They do it by giving campaign donations. And by the way, Evan Bayh also has received $500,000 over that same period of time in campaign donations from the insurance lobby. Okay, so they own the politicians, they own their families, they funnel money to them, and until we change that reality, we're never going to win on any of this stuff. So that's why I talk about the most important issue. Well, it might be campaign finance reform, but the general idea is the way that politicians get paid has to be changed. As long as they're getting their paychecks from these lobbyists and from corporate America, they will always do their bidding and not ours, the people who elected them.